Yeah, last week somebody approached me and asked me how difficult it would be to use Apache IoTDB or, in this case, TimechoDB in Ignition as a data source. I've been thinking about this quite some time since I first had contact with Ignition, but admittedly I never ever tried it before. So this time I thought, before answering, let me give this a little try. And admittedly, I was surprised by several things. So let me switch over here. So here I'm on the download page from InductiveAutomation for Ignition. And there are several things I would really like to point out. For example, the part is you can try it out, everything is for free. So you don't have to sort of like, yeah, we're all used to sort of like this. Yeah, please contact a sales representative, send in all of your information, and maybe you'll get sort of like a trial license for a week or maybe two. But the guys at InductiveAutomation, they do it completely differently. So you can download the full product. You can start and run the full product without any limitation. The only limitation is that there is sort of like a 2 hours timer ticking down. And as soon as this reaches 0, well, you have to click on reactivate to keep things going. Obviously, this wouldn't really work well in production. So this way, you have to pay for it if you want to really use it. But if you don't really want to use it or can't yet, you can use it for free. And I think that's really awesome. The next thing I was completely mind blown by, and I think I still have to sort of like, I promised I'll eat a broom. So in Germany we have this saying, da fress ich einen Besen, which translates to, well, if this works, well, I'm going to eat a broom. I might find some recipes for eating a nice and pretty broom. Well, you can download it on your Mac, and I wasn't expecting much because as a user of an M2 Mac, you've got used to sort of like, yeah, it's available for Mac, but not for you. But let's cut the story short. Ignition downloads, installs, and runs perfectly on an M2 Mac, which is pretty awesome. So in this case, I've already done it. This is how you start it. Well, if you install it, it automatically starts. But if you want to start and stop it, this is the way you do it on a Mac. So let's give this a spin. Okie dokie. So here's sort of like the landing page. Give it a few seconds. Okie dokie. So next we gotta log in. Okay, so now we want to add a new driver because Ignition comes with a list of well-known database drivers, but not the one for Apache IoTDB. And I would expect to be able to download the JDBC driver from here, but admittedly I was quite surprised that it wasn't. But be assured, that's one thing I'm going to be taking care of. So what I did now was I'm simply building, so you could sort of like download the all-in-one package, and that contains a JDBC driver, but unfortunately that's not sort of like a fat jar that contains all dependencies, so that actually doesn't work. So what I did was I built IoTDB locally. Well, as I'm working on it, well, that wasn't a big challenge, and so I'm just using that driver for now. So let's switch back to Ignition. So we want to add a new driver. So we want to say Apache IoTDB. The class name I'm going to get from here on the documentation page. As I said, I'm going to use sort of the driver version I built locally, and it's important, the driver is something around 20 megabytes. So if you've got the 100 and something kilobytes version, well, that doesn't contain the dependencies, and that doesn't work. So it's got to be something around 20 megabytes. So this is going to be a generic driver. I'm just going to be lazy and just copy this over here. That's the default connection string for connecting to the default port on localhost. Not leaving anything here. This is important because select one actually doesn't work on IoTDB, so you got to provide some sort of command that works. And I usually use this. As a dialect, will just use SQLite. Haven't seen and run into any problems with that. So now we've defined the Apache IoTDB driver. Next is we want to create a connection. And for that, I need something to connect to. And in order to have something to play around with, I've built this little application that uses Apache PLC4X to connect to my house's KNX network. And it just pumps all the data my house produces into a locally run embedded instance of Apache IoTDB. So I have an instance of IoTDB running that just magically gets all the information from my house. So let's create a new connection to it. As it contains the data for my house, let's call it house data. Yeah, we'll just leave this. The default username and password is root. And I think the rest should be pretty much, you can see it says valid instantly. When I used the not fat jar, it always kept on saying reconnecting, so this valid actually means something. So now we've provided a new connection, and we could use that in Ignition for doing all sorts of magic stuff. Thing is, I have to admit I have absolutely no experience with Ignition, so please excuse me if my example now might be sort of like a bit trivial, but at least it was something that I could sort of like intuitively and magically set up. So I've got this sort of like UI editor from Ignition. You can get there if you go here and get the designer, and if you click on that, this is actually the application that gets opened then. So what we want to do is I want to create a new query, and let's say let's call it energy data, because I just want to display some energy related data, because there's a lot of information in that database. Okay, so we don't need any input arguments. We'll select the house data, and now you can see over here it automatically fills this table browser with all the time series things I've got. Stuff like the energy system, or my weather station, or for every room, let's say we've got some the actual temperature, and if the heating system is currently heating the room. So I've got loads of information here. Here we're just going to focus on the energy consumption. And I've sort of like prepared several. So if we just take this one and run it. No, guess I paid good to the demo gods. But the thing is, you can see lots of data, but you can also see lots of null values in here. And this is because in IoT use cases, very often the information coming in is pretty sparse. So at a certain time, you only get part of the data. So working with this is sort of like a bit tricky. So what I do with IoTDB is that I simply use aggregation. And one thing, I should point out, So when having a look at Ignition, external data sources, and especially tag historians, I think I read in one forum post that using tag historians with sparse data is not sort of like encouraged because it wastes a lot of disk space and memory. But the thing is, I'm definitely going to look into building a tag historian for IoTDB because I know that sparse data is what it excels at. And I'm going to show you how I can convert this into something usable without any performance impact. So as it's a bit of typing, what I'm doing is I'm going to convert this into an aggregation query. So what I'm doing here is that I'm now sort of like just taking an average of all these values, and I'm going to group them by, I'm just taking a small window because otherwise, well, most of it doesn't have any data. And I'm sort of like grouping it by 2-minute values. I selected 2-minute values because I think I set up the energy system to send at least once every 1.5 minutes. So with 2 minutes, I should always have sort of like a value in that time frame. So let's have a look, execute the query. Well, here I didn't have the system turned on, but here you can see got a lot of good information. But it's looking a bit ugly. Let's say, how do we call this? This is sort of like the total energy consumption of my house. This is energy I'm importing from the grid. This is energy I'm producing with my solar power panels, and this is sort of like the amount of energy going into or out of the battery. So now this looks a lot better. Well, as you can see, energy production, well, you can probably guess the type of weather we're currently having. Usually on a good day it goes up to 7,000 watts. Right now we're at 130 or 240, well, pretty shitty day. But it's still producing data. So now we've got this energy data named query. So next thing is I'm gonna create a main window. Let's call this energy, and let's place a chart on it. Let's make this a bit bigger. And it took me a bit of time to find out how I can now connect that with the data source, but that happens down here. And you click on this little link button and simply select the energy data here. And off we go. So I can see here energy consumption, energy import, energy production, and well, charging the battery. Well, you can see there's not much energy left, but I think this is sort of like a nice little demo of how easy it actually is to get IoTDB data into Ignition. And I'm really looking forward to playing around with this because I really sort of like dig the idea of running Apache IoTDB sort of inside or alongside Ignition and using Apache IoTDB as a tag historian for doing some really amazing stuff with historic data. So I hope this was interesting for you guys, and I really hope that I'm going to be sharing some videos with some even more interesting stuff around Ignition, Apache IoTDB, and Apache PLC4X. So See ya, and yeah, have a great day.